Ever scroll through a website, in another language and kind of stop and think, wow, how'd they make this sound so natural? Well, that's what we're diving into today. The world of localization. And we're using insights from RoleCatcher. They're like, if you're job hunting, that's the place to be.
Oh yeah, role catchers is amazing, especially for a field like localization, because it's not just translating words. You got to make sure those ideas they really connect with a specific culture. Like
Yeah.
think about how a joke it can totally bomb in one language, but in another, everybody's dying laughing. That's the magic a localizer brings to the table.
I love that. So it's less about being a walking dictionary and more like, what did you call it? A cultural chameleon?
Exactly.
I like it. But okay, let's back up a sec. Say I'm just starting out thinking about this career path. What's a typical day even look like for a localizer? Are we talking like office cubicles, mountains of dictionaries?
Not even close. Actually, one of the best things about this field is how flexible it is. We're
Hmm.
seeing localizers working from home, those cool co-working spaces, some even living the dream, working from like a beachside cafe. The whole remote work boom has been huge.
No kidding. Being able to have a work style that actually fits your life, that's a game changer. Okay, but what about the work itself? What are localizers actually doing day to day?
It's way more diverse than you might think. I mean, think about it. Websites, apps, you name it, games, even medical documents.
Hmm.
They all need to be localized, right? So one day you might be making sure a marketing slogan, doesn't get lost in translation. And then the next you're making sure some new gadgets instructions make perfect sense, but for users all over the world.
It's like they're becoming more and more essential as the world becomes more interconnected. And speaking of essential, what about job security? Is this a field with a future?
100%. It's actually booming. Healthcare, legal, marketing, e-learning, everything. And even with AI, all the talk about AI taking jobs, it's actually creating more opportunities than it takes away.
Hmm.
Like we've got these neural machine translation tools that can do a pretty good job with a first draft, but you still need that human touch, that cultural nuance and creativity that only a localizer can bring.
So it's more like AI is becoming their new best friend, right? Freeing them up for the really interesting stuff. But let's be real, no job's perfect. What are some of the challenges someone who wants to be a localizer, what should they be ready for?
You're absolutely right. There are always challenges. One thing RoleCatcher really emphasizes is just how important research is in this job. You're constantly diving into new cultures, learning about their customs, what they find funny, all of it. It's fascinating, but it definitely takes dedication.
So you got to be a bit of a culture vulture, always learning, always exploring. What else?
Well, even if you speak like a bunch of languages fluently, there are always those tricky things. Idioms, slang, humor, those can be tough. Misinterpretations happen, and sometimes those consequences can be, well, pretty memorable.
Oh, I bet. I can only imagine some of the marketing disasters out there because someone missed a cultural nuance. But that just shows how important this job is. It's so much more than just swapping out words. It's about making sure the soul of a message that it stays intact no matter what language it's in.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher says was one of the most important skills for this? Active listening. They give it a 61% importance rating.
Wow, that's huge. But it makes sense, right? You got to be so tuned into those little cultural cues to really make a message connect. What about you? What stands out to you the most about this whole world of localization?
That's a great question. And, it's something we should definitely talk more about because it's not just about the day-to-day tasks, right? There's a whole career path here. RoleCatcher does a good job. They break down the different stages. You start at entry level, get your feet wet, and you can even end up in a leadership role, shaping global strategies for companies. What do you think about that?
That's what I'm excited to unpack next. This career path, it sounds dynamic. Let's dive into all that right after this. And we're back. Still swimming in the world of localization with RoleCatcher as our trusty guide. We've covered what it is, where they work, but how about the how? What skills do you absolutely need to make it in this field?
That's a great question because, it's easy to think, oh, you just got to be good at languages, right?
Right.
And fluency definitely matters. But RoleCatcher, they're really big on this. Cultural knowledge, just as important.
It's like that saying, right? Learn the language, learn the culture, become unstoppable. But what does that actually mean for a localizer, day in and day out?
Okay, imagine this. You're localizing a website. Fashion brand. They're going big in Japan. Now, a word-for-word translation might be grammatically perfect. But if it doesn't, feel right to someone who gets Japanese fashion, total flop.
Ah, I see.
A good localizer gets those unwritten rules. How formal it should be, what's trendy, even the humor. It's all about how the audience sees it.
So you're not just translating words, you're translating a whole vibe, which I guess means you need some serious writing skills too, huh?
You got it.
Yeah.
RoleCatcher actually says excellent writing and editing, that's crucial. Think about it. You're crafting this brand's voice, but for a whole different group of people.
Mm.
So it's got to be clear, got to have style, and of course that cultural sensitivity we keep talking about.
And so much is online now. I bet being good with tech is more and more important too. We talked about AI a bit, but what other tools are localizers using these days?
Oh, tech skills, those are non-negotiable. Besides AI, there's CAT tools, that's computer-assisted translation. They're great for keeping track of terminology so everything's consistent, especially on big projects. And then there are translation management systems, TMS for short. Those help streamline like the whole localization process from start to finish.
CCAT tools, TMS. I'm gonna need a whole other glossary to keep up with this stuff, but seriously, that sounds like a lot to learn.
It can be,
Okay.
but that's part of what makes it exciting. There's always something new in the localization world. Speaking of new, let's talk career path. RoleCatcher's got a really good breakdown of the different stages. You start entry level, you're just getting your feet wet. A lot of times that's quality assurance or translating simpler things.
Like any adventure, got to start somewhere. Where do you go from those first steps?
So RoleCatcher says you might move up to a junior localizer position. More responsibility there. Maybe you're even leading small projects. And all the while, you're building those skills, making connections in the industry.
Those early roles sound crucial. Like you're figuring out what you're best at, what part of localization you really love. But when you're ready for that next challenge, what then?
Things get really interesting then. RoleCatcher talks about becoming a mid-level localizer. That's when you're running the whole localization show, start to finish, coordinating translators, hitting deadlines, keeping that quality high. It's project management boot camp.
Wow. So you're not just a language whiz anymore. You're like the conductor of a whole global orchestra. And after you've conquered that mountain, what's the next peak?
That would be reaching senior localizer status. At that level, it's not just projects anymore. You're creating the whole localization strategy for a company, advising on going global, making sure the brand's message is consistent everywhere. You become the go-to expert.
Okay, from checking for errors to global strategist, that's quite the career ladder. But let's be real. To get those dream roles, you got to ace the interview, right? What does RoleCatcher have to say about that?
Oh, they've got you covered. Whole section on interview prep. They even have sample questions, and they're all specific to localization.
Yeah, that is music to any job seeker's ears. Give us a sneak peek. What kind of tricky questions should we be ready for?
One they always ask, how would you approach localizing something for a brand new market? That's where all that research you've done, that cultural knowledge, that's where it pays off. They want to see you've got a process, you understand those cultural values and how to adapt the content.
So you're showing them you can think strategically, you can be that bridge between language and culture. Any other tips from RoleCatcher?
They say it's really important to show your passion for language, for culture, obviously, and your experience with all the tools we talked about, the tech. And that you can work solo, but you can also be a team player.
Sounds like prep is key. But beyond all the technical stuff, the interview skills, there's just something different about this field, isn't there? It almost feels like a calling.
It absolutely does. And that's something we'll get into even more when we come back. Because localization, it's more than just a job. It's about connecting people, helping them understand each other. It's about making the world feel a little bit smaller. And we do that one word at a time.
And we are back one last time for this deep dive into localization with RoleCatcher as our guide, like always.
Yeah, it's been a journey, right? We've gone from those dictionaries and beach cafes to like AI tools and global strategies. It's a lot.
We have covered a lot of ground, that's for sure. But I gotta say, with all this, the tech stuff, the career advice, there's just this, I don't know, this feeling of purpose that seems to come with this line of work.
You're totally right. There's something more there, isn't there? Like I said, it's not just the words themselves. It's about the effect those words have, how they connect people from all different cultures all over the world.
Exactly. And RoleCatcher even mentions this, how important localization is, especially these days when everything's so interconnected. You got to make sure whether it's a product, a service, even just a message, it resonates authentically with people from all different backgrounds.
It's like we're building these bridges of understanding, but one carefully chosen word at a time. You think about it. A website, done right, it can open up a whole new market for a business. But it can also open people's minds,
Yeah.
to different ways of seeing things, different ways of life.
It's about that empathy, breaking down the walls that can divide us so easily. That's got to be rewarding for localizers, knowing they're part of something that makes the world a little more inclusive, a little more understanding.
100%. Imagine helping, like, a healthcare company. They've got this vital information, right?
Mm.
And you help them communicate that accurately to patients who speak a whole different language. Or maybe you're helping a filmmaker share their story with a global audience. That's localization at its best.
It really shows you, even with how digital the world is, words still have power. They can unite us or divide us. And localizers, they've decided, we're going to use our skills to build those bridges.
Well said. So as we wrap this up, we want everyone listening to think, how could your passion for language, for culture, how could that become a career in localization?
Go check out RoleCatcher, see what speaks to you, see where this path could lead.
Your own language adventure is out there. Who knows, maybe you'll be the one helping some groundbreaking product go global, or making sure a movie's subtitles, they capture every little bit of feeling from the original language.
Now that is a future worth aiming for. Thanks for joining us for this dive into the world of localization. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, keep diving deep.